In the last video, we saw how to use dplyr to select and filter on different tables. In this quick video, we'll see, what happens if we want to use data from multiple tables. So in the last video, we were working with plots, surveys, and species from our portal, from the portal project. And today, we'll join data from the different tables. Let's look at an example of the data from all three tables combined into a single mega table. So this big table contains information about plots, about the taxa that were collected, as well as the individual that were collected and observed on particular sampling events. It is not efficient to include all information in a single table because there is redundant information, which makes it difficult to update or revise data. For example, if the species or genus name change, there's a lot of taxonomic revisions. So instead of correcting the taxa name in the species table, you would have to correct it in multiple locations, not only in the species table, but also in your big table. And that can lead to errors. Maybe you change it in one place and forget to change it in another. Instead, it's best practice to use multiple tables where each table contains a single kind of information. So our surveys contains information from the observations that the individuals that were trapped in these small mammal traps, and it contains a plot ID and species ID, which relates it to the other tables. Species contains just information about the species names, the taxa, and that species ID, and plots contains just information about the plot type and the plot ID. And these columns link back to the surveys data. We can connect tables using joins that describe relationships between tables. A basic join combines two tables using one or more columns, and inner join, the function keeps information from both tables that share a join field value. So that's your column name. Let's create a new object called combine using this dplyr function inner join. We'll use our surveys object, and it expects, if you see in that yellow box, it expects the first two arguments to be the data frames that you want to combine, that you ultimately want to pull data from. So in this case, it's X and Y. So surveys is our first data frame and species is our second. And we need to tell the third argument is by. So we need to tell R how do we want to join these two data frames by what column? So by equals species ID. So that is the column that we want to join by. If we look at surveys, we see the species ID listed here. And if we look at species, we see the species ID code here as well. So we're going to join these two tables by species ID. So wherever there's a species ID equals AB in our surveys, the inner join will append the other columns from our species table. So if I'm trying to find that AB value for species ID, there it went quickly by. So now in our surveys data, we will have additional columns that describe the genus, species, and taxa. Let's run this command and look at the object we created. So now we have all the rows from our surveys data as well as the additional columns. So inner join keeps information from both tables that share a column. One way to think about this join is that it adds the information in species to the surveys table. If we wanted to do a multi-table join, portal full, let's call this, we would use inner join, our combined data frame, and now we want to call plots by equals, we want to join on the plot ID. I'm going to run that, and let's look at the first few rows for this portal full object. So in addition to the surveys data, we have the species data combined in this first join with the plot data combined in the second join. And if we wanted to do this all in one step, let's see an example of that. Now that we know how to use pipes, we would pipe this into another inner join. And instead of calling combined, we don't have to call that first argument anymore because R understands that it comes from this, from the above line, and I'll call it the same thing. And instead, we'll give it the arguments combined plots by plot ID. And it's saying that I'm missing something. And it says that there is no, let me see if I can pull up that unmatched opening bracket. So it says my open bracket is unmatched, which means there's no closed bracket. I see a closed bracket here, but it's green, which means that R understands it as a text, or because I'm missing the closed parentheses there. And if we look at our portal full, we see it produces that large table. So this, we saw an example of how you would combine information from multiple tables. Sometimes you need that additional data for downstream analyses. We also saw a few new error messages, so hopefully that helps you decode your own error messages as you're working through these exercises.